Hey all, welcome back to my channel. I'm really excited to present this interview with Jimmi Clarke, which we did a couple of weeks ago. Jimmy's played for the likes of Gloria Gaynor, Il Divo, and he's currently got a book out called Time to Fly, which is basically an accompaniment to his album, which he's previously released. And the book is basically kind of like full transcriptions of all the bass parts, so you can actually play along with his record. So it's really exciting. He's a lovely chap and an amazing bass player. So if you can, please go over to his Instagram and give him a follow. I'd obviously really be grateful if you could like and subscribe my YouTube content. So please click on the notification button below, and that will tell you every time I post a new video. Also, I'd love for you to follow me on Instagram as well, Bassman Jack. I'll hopefully be posting some more content in the next few weeks, so keep an eye out for that. And once again, thanks for watching. Take care for now, and I hope you enjoy the interview. Can you just introduce yourself and tell me a bit about you know, how you got into bass and your career so far, and you know what inspired you?
Well, I'm Jimmy Clarke. I've been a bass player now, a full-time bass player, since I left college back in I think '99. So 21 years of playing bass, which is nuts. So I grew up in this place, Lowestoft, this really small fishing town, obviously by the sea and by this sort of lovely area. Really quiet kind of place. Well, I say quiet, the Darkness are from here. So if you remember the Darkness, the rock band The Darkness, they're from here, which is quite cool. They went to my school, so that's a bit of rock and roll kind of history. But yeah, just kind of, you know, normal kind of kid. My dad was quite musical. He played bass in church. So I obviously heard that and got used to hearing the sound of the bass, and used to just love music. You know, I used to listen out for bass lines. I just thought it was the best instrument ever. Growing up, I wanted to be a car mechanic. I was just really into I just love how things work. I've got this kind of engineering brain where I need to know how things work and why they work. So so everything's like that. I wanted to be a car mechanic. And then I heard this gospel album with Abe Laboriel was playing bass on it, and he did this most ridiculous solo, and it was just this light bulb moment of like, that's me, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a bass player. And I was about 12 at that point, and I just played bass all the time. I was terrible at school. I I didn't really fit school. I just used to go to school and then hide in practice rooms and play bass all day, or piano, or whatever was around. And and then kind of went and did a B.Tech in commercial music, and then after that just started gigging really, and that has been my life sort of since. And it's just every week is an adventure with it, really. As you know, I sort of get to the end of most weeks or months and just think that's another sort of week that I've got away with it, you know. And you kind of think, wow, I've made it through another week, and off we go again, you know.
Am I right in thinking you kind of went straight into being kind of like a more of a soulful player, like playing a lot of soul music?
Yeah, well, it was kind of like I just really connected with a lot of the gospel kind of stuff, and then it was kind of going back from where the roots of that was. So I loved the way music felt. I loved the way music feels. So anything that's kind of Motown, Jameson-y, that kind of thing, I love. And but even like growing up, I was like in the mid-90s. There was stuff like Incognito was out, and Brownie Heavies, and they were kind of charting, you know, like Incognito was in the charts at that time, which is crazy. But then you had Jamiroquai as well, but you had like Pearl Jam, and you had like people were getting back into like Hendrix and stuff. So it was like, for music, there was just loads of stuff going on, and loads of live music going on, loads of pubs, and, you know, like the pub around the corner from where I lived always had bands on. And being like by the coast as well, there's loads of holiday camps that had resident bands, and it was just a really kind of vibey time for music, which was, and I loved it. And because I had this kind of like, how does that work? Why does that work? I was like the annoying kid that was asking loads of questions because you didn't have YouTube or the internet, you know, the only way you found this stuff out was by asking people how stuff worked. And yeah, so that was kind of what I ended up doing. And then I did my first paid function at like 14 years old, playing at like a local wedding reception, and just thought I can make money out of this. This is crazy. And yeah, and then joined my first kind of full-time, got a full-time residency gig in a little jazz club on a Monday and Tuesday night when I was 17. And then, you know, it just sort of, and then by the time I was sort of, you know, in my early 20s, I was doing the kind of London function thing, and then got involved in recording, doing a lot of kind of session work through, you know, Kristin, don't you? Kristin Hossein?
Yeah. Good friend of mine, yeah.
Right, yeah. So I met Kristin when she was just left ACM, and we started doing some songwriting together. And she'd written these incredible songs, really, really good stuff. And I remember being in my early 20s with her in the offices of EMI Publishing. I was playing piano and guitar to some of her songs, you know, while she was, just being her brilliant self. And she got invited to work with quite a half decent producer at kind of Townhouse Studios, and I got invited along and ended up playing bass on her stuff. And then the guy she was working with invited me to play on some more bits and pieces there, which was amazing. And it just kind of grew from that, really. It's the usual sort of musician thing, you know, like you're doing a pub gig 1 minute, the next minute you're at the Albert Hall, and then the next minute you're back at another pub, and then you're at the O2, and it's, you know, and that has been kind of my life in many ways. But I've always loved the nitty gritty of music. Like, why? I've always asked the question why with music. Like, why is this good? Why does this feel so good? Why does this sound so good? Why? How does that work? How can I make myself do that in my own playing? So almost like reverse engineering albums, you know, thinking, well, what do I need to do to get that sound or get that groove working or doing this and that? And I'm just like I'm just a real geek, you know, I'm like really into it. So I just spend hours just kind of, learning stuff and trying to get stuff better, and just trying to get those things better in my own playing, really.
And are these things you kind of, you know, that kind of reverse engineering of kind of parts and lines, is that something you do, because you've got your own YouTube channel as well, is that something that you kind of cover on those videos?
It's definitely something that I cover with a lot of my students. I found it's I don't know what I learnt music like in a really weird way, I suppose. I always felt like a bit of I'd got friends who'd gone down the college route and gone to amazing colleges and things like that, and I kind of didn't do that. So I went to like Yarmouth College, which is not really got a massive reputation for, you know, being like a musician place, even though actually there's some brilliant bass players who went on, you know, I think when I was there, I was there with 3 other bass players who are all now full-time bass players. So actually it's quite an amazing place thinking about it. But like education was really bizarre, because I'd grown up playing in church and doing everything by ear, so I couldn't read music or anything like that, and had developed really good ears and kind of understood like the number system, you know, like the Nashville number system, and then I learned music and learned how to read at college and that kind of stuff, and ended up doing like music theory, and it was like the two didn't quite go together. So it was like I did grade 8 music theory, but then I had like music how I knew it in my head, and the two seemed almost polar opposites in some way. So like I'd sit down and I'd listen to a song and I'd like work it all out in my head, and then like the sort of like the cadences and all the crazy kind of classical stuff just didn't suit my kind of church background. So sort of weaving them together became really, really good. But my education was always really bizarre. So then I've sort of tried to get a lot of lessons with a lot of people to fill in those gaps. And but I find it's still like I still go back to that kind of original way of learning, like just learning everything by ear and like reverse engineering it, listening to it, and rather than listening to the notes, listen to the way it feels and listen to the tone of everything, and trying to kind of get more out of that side of it. So what I find is really interesting is there's so much information out there on like music education, right? And everyone's telling like their story of what to do and how to get good. And I kind of think that sometimes when I think about the people that I work for who are producers and artists and stuff, they just want things that sound good and feel good. That's it. No more. Do you know what I mean? They want you to play a line that feels great and sounds great. And sometimes we can really overcomplicate everything. But actually, it's just those two really basic things. So, so the things that I've really looked at a lot is listening, obviously, like listening to music really as deeply as you can to try and get as much out of it as possible. And then, right, how does this sound? How does this feel? Because I know that if I get the call to go into a studio and do a session, that's what the producer is interested in. Doesn't care what scales I know, or it doesn't really care what gear I've got. You know, as long as it sounds good and feels good, it's going to be happy. And as a service provider, that's kind of the job, isn't it? You know, so it's kind of like, right, I want this to feel good and sound good, and hopefully provide a great kind of bass service to people. And that seems to be the thing that I've always done. And yeah, it seems to kind of work in a way.
Yeah, it's two quite underrated ideas. I think you're right. I mean, I noticed a lot about. I mean, again, you know why everyone should go and check out your tuition videos and maybe book in for a lesson if they really like it. Is because actually there is so much out there, and I kind of think, you know, that having that one-to-one tuition, having someone that can actually kind of really focus on your individual strengths and weaknesses, it can only happen with that human interaction. You're not going to get that from just playing through videos. You know, we've all been there. We've like studied something, and then someone else has just gone, oh, you know, if you try it that way, and then you have that light bulb moment. I really like every time I kind of go on your videos and you've got a different bass and you're making it work and sound in a different way. You know, for example, like when you're doing your kind of slap videos and it's like the perfect slap sound, but then you go on to something else and you've got this perfect sound for this. Right. And I think that's something that, you know, I personally, like, I've kind of sometimes overlooked a little bit. And it just kind of helps to sell that idea or that concept, I think. So have you kind of accrued all the gear you need now to get all the sounds that you are in your palette?
I think so. I don't think there's really that many. Do you know what I mean? I don't think there's that many sounds that you need. Yeah, I'm happy with this. I'm happy with the stuff that I've got, which, you know, obviously my wife is very thankful for, because, you know, spending thousands and thousands of pounds on bass, you know, on like the dream. This one, honestly, love, this one is going to be the one that solves all my problems, and then it doesn't. You know, it's just another bass guitar. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with the way I've got things working. What is really interesting is I seem to use less and less gear over time. So I tend to just use a bass and just plug it straight into my interface. You know, where like 10 years ago, you know, I'd had loads of different preamps, loads of different things and great kind of pieces of gear that have just sort of over the years have just kind of disappeared. So I've got a real kind of simple setup. I think a lot of that is, yeah, just down to really exploring and rinsing like an instrument for everything it's worth. You know, just really like having to try and come up with the goods on an instrument. And, you know, for years I've got this green Stingray bass, which I've had since I was 19. And there was so many years, like when the kids were little, I couldn't really afford anything else, but I just had that. So I had to rinse it for everything it was worth, you know, and you're using it on a jazz gig or a rock gig or whatever. And so you find your technique. You're sort of playing right up the neck to get it as smooth as possible and as warm as possible, and you're doing all this stuff just to try and make it work. And so but I think it's all horses for courses. I think you can get a bass and do a quick truss rod adjustment, and you can go from a real kind of fat sounding nice tone to a real kind of quite cool slap tone with a couple of turns of a truss rod. So it's but this is my kind of engineering kind of wanting to come up with like the perfect situation.
Well, I think that kind of feeds back into the kind of, there are millions of basses out there to choose from, and you can get overwhelmed by options. I think Tell me about this book then. So what's the book about?
Right. So the book is basically, here it is. It's just that was just a transcription of my album. So I wrote this album a couple of years ago, and it was a real interesting time. As you probably aware, I had cancer a few years ago, and that was kind of a bit hit and miss of whether I'll be able to tour again, play again, or what would I do. And so I thought, well, I need to kind of do something that's going to be helpful. I just felt like if I can't tour or I can't sort of play like I used to, I'd love to just create something that would be like a really good gift to the 17-year-old version of me. So I wrote this album, and just every track was designed to kind of just help that whole kind of sound and feel thing, just kind of really okay, well, this is so the first tune, for instance, is all about how you swing notes, and how how before we had a grid, before we had Pro Tools, and we used to, the first recording sessions I did, there wasn't a TV, there wasn't a monitor in the room, it was just a tape machine, so feel was just about musicians just doing this all the time, and that was how kind of grooves were created for, drummer hits here, bass players here, guitarist is here, and that's your kind of groove, as it were. But now everything's locked to the grid, you kind of miss that kind of swing, and so that track was all about kind of the fact that you can have a different kind of swing even within one bar, and the fact that you can make the beat 4 just really kind of and just be really late on beat 4, and it makes things feel slightly different. And then the second track was based on kind of a Don Blackman kind of Al Jarreau kind of vibe, and
nice.
And there were just kind of things that I liked, and that I sort of struggled to get down as a player. So everything's quite the tempos of the tunes are quite slow because they're tougher to play when they're slow, and they're just kind of every track is just kind of looking at a different kind of discipline and a different thing, and the book is just a transcription of that. So if you hear the album, you can check out the book and go through it all.
Where's it available?
So the book is available from Amazon UK. Yeah, so which is great. Which is a handy place to have it available because everyone's on Amazon. So that's good. And then I've got backing tracks to all the tunes, bassless backing tracks from my site, which again something that I found really useful, because if you're wanting to get into the recording thing and you're wanting to obviously record, the best thing to do is to play in context. So if you've got a track without the bass, then it's like being in a recording session. It's kind of practice for that kind of thing, and you can listen back and see how you're grooving, how you're doing, are you kind of locking in, does it feel good, and then how does it sound, and then you can kind of produce yourself, as it were, and kind of do that really. So but I think the whole thing was just a gift to the 17-year-old me, really. So hopefully, if there's any bass players out there that are into that kind of thing and that can help, then brilliant. I really hope it does. So yeah,
that's great. So I mean, I really like that idea of again, it sounds like your reverse engineering approach, which is creating music or play-alongs deal with a musical challenge or a technical challenge. I think, you know, for example, in my own teaching, like if I'm often sending out kind of like, you know, bespoke exercises or play-alongs to deal with a particular thing, whether it be jamming over like a 2-chord progression or, you know, something that deals with a feel concept. What other kind of concepts did you have to deal with, and have you got any concepts that you've kind of, you know, you got to this point in your playing that you were like, oh man, I really need to work on that? How did you feel about your kind of own technique and musicality at this point?
Yeah, I feel still like a student. I feel still like a kid with so much to learn, you know. And I think the deeper you go into something, the more you kind of find out about your playing. So something that I loved seeing was that, I don't know if you saw on the One Show, there was a brilliant piece with Pino where he's talking about Wherever I Lay My Hat.
Yeah.
You know, and he's talking about, you know, and I listen to that and think it's incredible and I love it, you know, and he's talking about like the first time he heard it in a taxi or whatever, and he's like, oh no, the bass is too loud, I'll never get booked again, that's terrible, you know. And the rest of the world are going like, this is incredible. But I think as a musician, you know, I always hear, I don't hear like, I do hear what I get right, but I think there's something within us where we all hear where we're slightly off-piste, we all hear where we could have done it better, and we all can kind of beat ourselves up with, oh, that could be better, that could be tighter, that could be, you know, that could be well executed. And even for me, I still, you know, I went and got a bass lesson 6 weeks ago with my old teacher from years ago, a guy called Paul Westwood, who wrote the bass Bible.
Yeah, Paul Westwood.
That, but yeah. So I had some lessons with him when I was sort of 18, 19. And that was horrendous. It was like one of the worst experiences ever, because I thought I was kind of all right, you know, and then I go and see like this bass Jedi and he completely pulls apart my technique, tells me what you know, I remember him saying to me that basically I couldn't kick a ball straight, you know. It's like you're trying out for a football team, you can't even kick the ball straight. But he really made me see, it made me really aware of my especially my left hand technique, what I was doing, what I wasn't doing, and you know, and things like playing the scales just smoothly, having like one note just, you know, smoothly going into the next, and all those kind of things that we have to keep kind of practicing and trying to do is yeah, it's interesting stuff really. So with my own playing, I still hear that all the time. I still hear things like in my right hand technique, I think could be better, could be tighter, could be this and that. I'm so self-critical, and I think that's just a real musician thing, that we all just really beat ourselves up. But yeah, so, you know, when I hear my slap stuff, I think that could be tidier, it's a bit loose, it's a bit this, it's a bit whatever. So they're all things that I'm just working on, but even like that is great because I can still use it as a reference to kind of keep myself in check, really, you know. You did
the Stomp transcription recently. I can kind of tell where your influences are in regard to your slap playing. Can you talk about some of your other bass influences, people that really kind of like inspired you on?
Oh, yeah. So I think, you know, I've said that I love things that feel great. So, you know, going back would be James Jameson, obviously. You know, I love anything that he's done. A massive Quincy Jones fan. Just love all of Quincy's stuff. So big Lewis Johnson fan. I think he's incredible. And I was really into that whole kind of acid jazz kind of thing. Coming from that kind of church background, that was kind of, you know, the kind of gospel thing. So, you know, gospel players like Andre Gouche and those kind of guys, Justin Raines and Daryl Freeman, those kind of guys I always thought were amazing, and I always really kind of aspired to be like. And yeah, but I'm someone that's really easily inspired, so I get inspired by like loads, really. It's sort of, I've always thought that there's two types of music, and that's good and bad, and I love it. Like anything from like ABBA to you know, Metallica, I just there's bits in it that is just gold that I love. So yeah, interesting really. Got quite an interesting kind of and vast kind of music collection, but I get so much out of all of it really.
Can you talk about a bit about your some of your kind of like favourite artists you've worked with and some of the gigs that really defined you as a player and really helped you to kind of your career to develop?
I think rather than, I mean, artists, yeah, great, but I think like people that I've been on the bandstand with have been the biggest help. You know, like mentors that have really, just out of just sheer love and kindness, have taken me under their wing and helped me along the way. There's people that that I'm so indebted to. You know, from even being a kid. Like I used to be in a jazz orchestra, youth jazz orchestra. Which is based like near where I live, and the guy that ran that was this Scottish guy called Pete Fraser, who was amazing. He was like Glaswegian and really abusive to all the kids. You know, if you couldn't read Charlie Parker, he would like shout, you know, but was really kind and really caring and would really like, oh Jim, have you heard this? Check this out, you know, and these incredible, like he introduced me like to like the Buddy Rich band, Maynard Ferguson band, and all those kind of really hip kind of big bands. And you know, I think the first time I heard Weather Report was from like big band arrangements of it that he had played me, you know, and things like that, which was amazing. And it's just been loads of guys like that have been really beneficial. I think like artists, my CV is pretty random really. I've done stuff from like working with Il Divo for a few years, you know, which for the Simon Cowell's big kind of classical thing, which was amazing working on that gig with Andrew Small as MD, because he's just an incredible drummer, incredible kind of like, his albums are phenomenal. He's incredible like fusion and funk player and gospel player, and we were on this kind of pop classical gig, and just the way he handled that gig was incredible, you know, turning up playing with like the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra and stuff and doing like incredible gigs, and just seeing someone like him work with that kind of capacity, as you know, someone that's sitting behind the drum kit, but he's sorting out string arrangements, he's sorting out vocal arrangements for these four guys and just making it all happen. Phenomenal actually. I'm just on a gig where you're playing loads of long notes, you know, again talking about tone and sound, and you know, and making it feel good. You know, it's like a lot of people would see it as really quite boring, but actually it was an incredible discipline, you know, like just playing these kind of songs and trying to get, you know, you're feeling like we're doing like an arena tour and you're feeling like these arenas shake to your notes, you know, and it's like it needs to just be really, it needs to be right, or if not it's terrible. So yeah, so like Andrew's been a massive encourager to me really. He's someone that has really stirred me on and has like, yeah, you can do this, you know, you've got this, and he's really inspired me into getting into a lot of production myself, and so which is great. And for the last sort of 13 years I've been doing the Gloria Gaynor gig, which has been, you know, amazing, because I love the whole kind of funk and disco thing anyway, you know, it's like my dream gig really. So working with her has been yeah, it's been pretty insane, really.
Iconic songs and just great bass parts. I mean, it's kind of what more do you need?
Yeah, exactly. And you always end up on these really amazing gigs because she's like this, you know, it's always like she'll do like these crazy disco festivals. I mean, we've got one coming up soon, which hopefully, well, it will probably get cancelled, but we're doing like a gig with Lionel Richie, you know, and it's like things like that they're just so good, you know. And we've done gigs where like you've had Chic and Sister Sledge on the same bill, or Shaka Khan, or you know, and it's like, oh, it's great just to be in the crowd, let alone, you know, be able to play bass at the same time, you know. So yeah, so that's been really, really cool.
And what do you think in terms of kind of going forward? There's so many unknowns at the moment. How's this kind of like, not downtime, but you know, kind of inability to kind of leave the house as much? How's that kind of made you reflect on what you'd like to do in the future?
The thing that I've been able to do is I've been able to do sessions like working from here, and I've been able to teach, you know, like online and stuff, and that's been really good. I've actually really enjoyed it. It's done me done me the world of good, actually. So I'm kind of like, I've found a little bit of a groove with that. All right, it's not going out. I miss people like terribly, you know, just going out and having a drink with friends and hanging out, and you know, it's hard not having that. But I think moving on, like for me, it's been quite an interesting time. I mean, like just like recording wise, done some really interesting projects. You know, even in the last couple of weeks, I just did a couple of tracks for Dave Hawkins, who plays guitar in British Lion, which is Steve Harris's band from Iron Maiden. So he's got like his side project, and Dave's a guitarist from that, and he's written some instrumental stuff. And so I've been playing on that and kind of doing some. That's been really cool. And then I've just done a fusion project with a guy called Adam Moore, and you've got these tunes in like 11/16 and all this sort of craziness, and that's just been really fun. And yeah, like those kind of opportunities, you sort of like, you get back to the, I really enjoy this, you know, I really love this. This is why I got into music. And I think it's really important as musicians that we don't get so bogged down with the business side of it, that we stop being inspired, and that we stop kind of doing it because we love it. Because it's so hard when you're like trying to make a living, and you know, as you know, when you've got, you know, you've got family, you've got kids, you've got, you know, bills to pay, and you've got all this kind of pressure on you, you can quite easily lose your love for it. So I find like doing these little projects just have made it become a bit like a hobby again, and you know, I'm really kind of enjoying it. And obviously got like the book out and things like that, and that's just been a fun thing to do. So yeah, who knows, you know, who knows what the future kind of holds, really. I might even get some gigs doing my own thing, possibly. Who knows? We'll see what happens. But
yeah,
you know,
people are going to be wanting to hear and see live music, you know, when we can go out and perform again. So I think, you know, it's going to hopefully people take the opportunity and go and kind of like put on their projects that they've been kind of like formulating over this time. I was going to say, can you remind me of the title of the album and the book as well, please?
Yeah, it's called Time to Fly. The album's called Time to Fly, and it's just Time to Fly, the bass book. So that's what the album's called. The album's on Apple Music, Spotify, and Amazon Music, and all the other bits and pieces. And and obviously the book's available on Amazon.
And is it both tab and notation? Or?
Yeah, it's full tab and notation, so which is great. Yeah.
Yes, people could actually know exactly where you played that sweet note.
Yeah. So and the thing is as well, it's like it's a transcription of what I did on the album, where the stuff that I did on YouTube where I play along, I do go a little bit off piece. So so it's more like the album version than what I played on YouTube, but the same lines, you know.
How did you feel going back and transcribing your own playing? That's always a bit of an interesting one.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It makes you realise how you do the same stuff all the time. It's like, wow, I'm really locked into the same things. But yeah, theory's an interesting one. I think it should give you enough to like learning basic music theory, or even like just how a key works, you know, the 7 notes that you get within a key, and how each of those 7 notes have 7 chords that come off them, and how they're a family, and how they work together, and how, you know, it can be like your classic kind of 1 6 4 5 kind of Ed Sheeran song, or it can be like your 2 and 5 groove, like your you know, like your Ladies Night or your Uptown Funk or whatever. You know, you've still got those 7 notes, you know, and you can produce this great funk tune, or you can produce this great pop tune, and it's just 7 notes, 7 chords. That's kind of what is there. And then you've got like these extra 5 notes that you can chuck in that just make things chromatic, which means color. So like chroma means color, and you can just add these extra colors to those extra 7 notes to just create whatever you want. And what I found really exciting with teaching is that so many people like come to me like talking about playing out of the box. They'll hear jazz, or they'll work out like a Jacko thing, or they'll be talking about playing out of the box and all this kind of stuff. And what I've noticed that is a lot of people don't have a really good understanding of in the box, and I think once you appreciate the beauty of the box and how a key works and what you've got in there, there's so much in there. And then when you start to take it out of the box, you can execute these other chords and other harmonies really well and create all these other kind of textures and things that really make music explode. But I think theory's amazing. Once you have that sort of foundational knowledge of it, it's so helpful. It's something that makes the fretboard go from this small place to this open mass of possibilities. So what was incredible, like I think 5 days before I got ill, I got diagnosed on the 5th of January. And so the 1st of January, I wrote like New Year's resolutions, which I never normally bother with. And it was like, I wanted to be fearless, like with my playing and with what I do, what I take on. I want to take on like exactly what you're saying, I just want to take on stuff that I want to do that makes me a musician again. And I want to get involved in my own projects. And I don't want money to be this thing that stops me from being creative. I just want to make it work. And then 5 days later, I get cancer, and then you sort of go through this whole kind of crazy like mind thing of like, am I going to make it, and what's going to happen? And then you're sort of like, well, actually, if I do make it, if I do, if this doesn't get me, then I've got to make an album. I've got to do this. I've got to do that, and it's like because I can, and one of the things that I remember chatting to, do you know a drummer called Craig Blundell? Have you ever come across him?
Yeah, this is like clinics and stuff, and like
yeah. So I did some functions with him years ago, and he was then stopping doing functions because he was going to get a day job, because he wanted to work on his drumming, and he didn't want it to be this just financial pressure all the time. So he stopped gigging, got a job, and then just absolutely shredded his drum stuff in his spare time. And then within like a couple of years was then, a massive clinician for Roland and doing all this stuff, which then led to some really great gigs for him, And that really kind of, I remember thinking, wow, that's really interesting, because I'm kind of stuck in this wheel of function world of where I'm just making enough money, just keeping my head above water, no time for anything creative. And I just knew that needed to stop. And so after when I got well, I took on this job as band leader at this resort place down the road, Potter's Resort, which is where I'm working with Carl Penny, which is great. Just a 4-piece band working 5 nights a week. Really great singers, really nice place, incredible gear, like privately owned, family owned sort of business, but really good. Got a great like 1,200 seater theatre and all that kind of stuff. So it's a bit like a cruise ship, but on land, but just down the road. And I thought, actually, if I take that on and get myself kind of out of the game, as it were, I can then get my head into my own kind of game of, right, well, I really want to teach well, because that's something that I really want to do. I want to pass on what I'm doing to the next generation. I really want to write more, because I'm not doing enough of that, and I really want to do some other things. And actually that has enabled me to do the other stuff, which is kind of reversing engineering it again, if you know what I mean. It's sort of it seems odd to kind of take yourself out of like the scene, as it were, but then it's, for me, just feels way more productive.
Thank you so much to Jimmy for doing the interview. And obviously we'd both be grateful if you could go and give our YouTube channels and our Instagram accounts a follow or a like or subscribe. All right, take care for now.